Welcome to the lighter side of the dark side. It's your weekly freak show here on Renegade Radio and all podcast catchers, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher. Geez, I haven't said Stitch in a while. I don't know if anybody still listens to that, but Apple, everywhere you listen to podcasts, it's the Dark Mark Show. I am Dark Mark, the goth comedian, and as always, everybody's favorite horror writer, Nicole Six.
Good afternoon.
Now, Nicole, you told me when I propositioned this guest to be on the show, you're like, wow, it's so nice that people are recommending our podcast.
Yes, I think that's awesome.
Yes, and our friend Dwayne Scott Cerny,
woo woo,
who has, he's written a couple other books besides this one, which is Seeing Dead People's Things.
Selling Dead People's Things.
Yeah, Selling Dead People's Things. Thank you, because I can't read. I'm illiterate. But yeah, Selling Dead People's Things. There it is right there. Please order that. And he recommended that this person be on our podcast. And it's great because, Nicole, in the pandemic, some people did like I did and just slept, masturbated, and watched really bad movies. But then some people got very creative. They launched podcasts, they lived their dreams, and they did a lot of writing and a lot of creative things. You wrote a poetry book. And this man started his own podcast, which is basically he's bringing back short radio plays for the 21st century. And he's had an all-star cast. Actually, behind him, he has the first season cast, which has luminaries like Sally Struthers from All in the Family, B.D. Wong from Law and Order, Big Pussy from The Sopranos, Alyssa Reiner from Orange is the New Black, and Marsha Mason And in the second season, he had other luminaries like, Bruce Villanch. He had just an all-star cast. Piper Laurie from Carrie. Just Tony, Emmy, and Oscar winners and nominees all over the place, all to act out what he has written. Here he is, Brad Forenza.
Who the hell is Brad Forenza? Thank you, Dark Mark. Thank you for having me on, Nicole. This is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. So thanks for letting me talk about Around the Sun.
Oh, Around the Sun is great. I've listened to a few episodes, and it is. I recommend it to everybody. And we're going to talk about all of that. But before we do, I need to match your energy, Brad, because you're like shot out of a cannon. So this is what I've been drinking right here is Ray's energy drink. This is the best.
Boom.
I don't know if you drink energy drinks, but this is the best. If you can get that, the Zoom is not helping, but this is really good. I drink energy drinks. I've tried them all. This is the best. This is Baja Lime flavor, which tastes like Baja Blast from Taco Bell. And the best part about Ray's energy drink, 0 calories, 0 carbs.
Wow.
0 crash.
You're bringing me back to when my dad was on this plane with us. He used to sell energy drinks, so he would love that we're opening with Ray's.
Oh wow, okay. I don't know if he sold that, but man, that was Ray's energy drink is the best, and they have other great flavors like Nicole's favorite is Voodoo Fruit Punch. They have Galaxy Burst that tastes like Fruity Pebbles, Ginger Ale Juice Box. Nicole, you love the juice box.
It's delicious.
Yeah, and all these flavors. And you could go to the Vitamin Shop or GNC or any of these gyms because you can't get them at 7-Elevens. You can't get them in supermarkets. But why pay full price? Go to our code in the description where if you're on YouTube or on the podcast catchers or even Renegade Radio and get a case of Ray's energy drinks for 15% off. Ray's energy drinks. So this is because you're bringing the audio plays back. I'm bringing the live commercials back. So
true that.
And boy, we got some doozies coming up. But you grew up
doozies and do's. So
yeah,
everybody's getting your wonderful content for free. So it's only decent, folks. It's
exactly. And I haven't started a Patreon yet, but one of these days, you'll start have to pay for some Dark Mark exclusives. But it's free for now. So, Brad, you grew up in Jersey City. I know very little about that. How was that?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Jersey suburbs. My parents were split, so kind of all over Jersey. But in my adult life, I've lived in Jersey City, for quite a while now. And
so you're still in Jersey City?
Yep. it's a great place to live. We are more than the jokes and the exits on the Parkway and the Turnpike. But if Jersey City were in New York State, I think people would consider it another borough because we have subway access to and from Manhattan. And at the same time, we can get out to the burbs with a little more ease when needed.
Well, it's funny because you always describe yourself as a New Yorker, but you really live in New Jersey. But it's so close.
Yeah, I feel like many things in life, I say I'm a New Yorker and people understand what that means, but at the same time, it just takes too many syllables and sentences to explain Jersey City. A lot of people don't know it, and yet it's the pseudonym is the Golden Door City because Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty are a stone's throw, and
Right.
New York takes ownership of them because New York gets everything. I mean, Giant Stadium is also in New Jersey, among many other things. But Jersey City has a lot of awesome history in it beyond my beautiful family.
I'll tell you, the only thing I know about Jersey City, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, is this guy who owned the Tube Bar, which apparently is closed. And before the Jerky Boys and all that crank call stuff, like in the 70s, they used to call this guy. He was in Jersey City, and the guy just had this gruff voice, and they would call him up, and and the Simpsons ripped this off. Like they would call like Alcacuris there, is Bend over there, is Pepperoni there, and the guy would call it out. He's like, "It's Bend over there," and he just had this rough voice, and he would yell at them, and they'd be like, "We're gonna come down and fight you. Come on down, you motherfucker!" That's like
that's my neighborhood. That might be at the bottom of my building, or a relative. Who knows?
Possibly, you may be related to Red.
Yes,
but and our friend Chris Gore, he made a movie about the Two Bar tapes, and it's on YouTube. You should check it out. But I've got friends from Jersey, Teaneck, New Jersey. I know
it well.
I went to a wedding in Weehawken, and
right up Tunnelly Ave.
Right.
I have one friend from Jersey. He has a store on the boardwalk called Fame.
Oh,
are you familiar with Fame?
I'm familiar with the boardwalk, and the boardwalk is just iconic Jersey. So I'll look for Fame if I get down there before summer ends. Which boardwalk? Is it Seaside, Point Pleasant?
Wildwood, New Jersey.
Wildwood, way down. So I don't usually get down there, but during the pandemic, I definitely made a point to do lots of regional travel. So that was one of the first and last times I've been to Wildwood, but I loved it. And Cape May as well.
Because the stereotype of Jersey is either Jersey Shore, The Sopranos, or Real Housewives from New Jersey. And except for Jersey Shore, and I'm sure that might be coming up in season 4, you've had several people from The Sopranos one of the Real Housewives from New Jersey do your plays.
The Real Housewives of New Jersey has done very well by my beautiful cousin Dolores, who's in turn lent her visibility to some of these projects like Around the Sun. And that, I think, paves the way for Vincent Pastore from Sopranos and many other things to say yes to other projects. Both of them are part of Around the Sun, as you can see behind me.
Did you start off as a writer or an actor? Because you do both. And you direct movies as well.
Yep. And directing's kind of a means to an end for me. I like it. And at the same time, writing and acting feels closer to home for me. And producing, I've learned I don't hate. There's a lot of cool generative stuff to happen in that world. But yeah, I've always written, I've always acted, and sometimes I've been asked, when did I start? And I don't know that I ever didn't do it.
So you were at school plays when you were a kid?
School plays, I wrote my own stuff when I was a little kid. My grandfather, who had been a printer in Hoboken, worked on a printing press, a union guy. He would take down dictation as I would tell stories for him. And then the last thing we would do was add the copyright. He impressed upon me that was very important to do.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And my dad, who I invoked earlier, he wasn't much of a writer, but he was definitely a storyteller. So I think that gift came from him. And my mom read me stories, all that stuff. That's very hallmarky, but also the world is filled with many wonderful, colorful people in my life. And they've kind of, through osmosis, found their way into these 10-minute plays, now 10-minute radio plays or scripted podcast episodes called Around the Sun.
So this makes me think about a conversation I was having about AI the other day, because I was talking to another writer and they were explaining what they think makes work when you're writing beautiful is you're taking all the different experiences and perspectives you've absorbed as a writer and put it into it. What do you think? Do you think that AI is capable of having the same kind of emotion as an actual writer?
That's an awesome question. And
let me ask ChatGPT that question and I'll get back to you. Okay.
I want to sound smart in giving an answer. I think my gut instinct is to say no, artificial intelligence could never replicate or communicate the depth of the human experience. And I haven't seen it come close based on what I've seen AI kind of bang out with respect to the written word. But who knows when we move on to the next plane where AI will be at. But I'm thinking of Wall-E right now, that Disney film from maybe 15 or so years ago. Quick math. I don't know if a machine will be able to have that depth and nuance of what it is to live in the world and experience love and laughter and loss. But Wall-E comes to mind because what I'm remembering is the poignancy in that little robot's words when he was looking for Eva.
Yeah, that's the real thing. Do we think we'll ever have the ability for them to actually experience emotion? Because emotion is what part of the human experience. It's part of what makes us who we are. Like emotion and consciousness are kind of the whole depth of the human soul.
Yeah. Yeah. I was at a funeral once and I remember the priest saying that this is what makes humans unique, that we feel, and it's what separates us from other animals. And at the same time, without contradicting a priest, animals, I think, show their feelings quite close to the surface. Yeah. And I don't know that a machine could ever do that.
No, I don't think so either. But it'll be interesting to see which way they take it. I mean, a machine could come up with a generic plot based off of several other plots, but I don't think they'll ever have the depth, as you said, the depth of the human experience.
And you said it too, Nicole. I'm with you. And I hope not.
Think of where AI was a year ago and where it is now. There's no way a year ago you would think it'd be where it is now. So where it's going to be next year or 5 years down the road, I don't even know if there's going to be human beings 5 years down the road.
Oh gosh. So if I were to think about where I draw my inspiration from, and you, Mark, as a comedian, where you draw your inspiration from, or you invoke Bruce Villanch, where someone like that draws their inspiration from when they're writing, at some level, they're drawing on experience that a machine can't have, or to date a machine doesn't have. So the term in writer circles is, are they hacking it? Are they phoning it in? I would think a machine that's not out there living in the world would be phoning it in.
That's a good question. Will machines be able to have experiences?
Yeah. Will they sneeze, which is different than love and loss and laughter, but will they get paper cuts and know what that's like?
I don't know. I've seen robots with human faces react to humans and make faces like they were reacting like it's pretty scary.
Is this a joke about Botox?
Yes, basically, yeah, that's what it is. What is humanity anymore? Because human beings have changed since the pandemic. I mean, nobody knows how to socialize anymore.
Agreed. I feel very badly for the kids, the toddlers who came of age in that stretch of time. They've got catching up to do. Not being able to hug or touch or wrestle around with friends. That's a human experience like none we've experienced.
Humans are being more robot-like, and it's all on the internet. It's all TikTok, social media.
I was going to ask, how has your experiences developed the writing that you've been doing currently?
Around the Sun?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I would say, while it's not a carbon copy of my life's experience, we're pushing 30 episodes now, and there's 10 episodes a season. I just wrapped season 3 with a little more to work on in post-production. I would say there's aspects of my life in each of these episodes. Some, the experiences might be closer to the surface than others, but there's something in my soul that compelled me to write what I wrote in any of these 30-ish episodes. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but I think there's a little of my lived experience in each of these episodes, some more carbon copied than others.
Where would you tell people to start? What is the experience that resonated the deepest for you? I mean, obviously it started at the beginning, but like, if you think of it out of order, just like if someone was coming into it, what would be your recommendation of?
Yeah, Nicole wants to hear one episode and then decide from there. It's like you get a free trial. So
okay.
I didn't say that, but if it's,
you didn't say that, but you inferred that. I understand.
I mean, I'm now invoking my dad for the 3rd time. So my dad died during the pandemic, but not from COVID. And I was able to say goodbye. And at the same time, it still was a very steep decline. And I shared many of these episodes in their draft form with him when I was sitting in the hospital with him. And yeah, he understood it on some level. And I just know if he were around to engage with Around the Sun, he would just be so proud and promoting it way more frequently than I would want for him to. But when he died, I still had some episodes to produce. So one of them was called Marathon, Nicole, episode 1.9 with Dr. Francois Clemens, who is best known for playing Officer Clemens on 25 seasons of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He's the guy who's getting his feet washed in the kiddie pool alongside Fred Rogers. Yeah. And he's also well known for interpreting spirituals. And my dad loved Michael Row the Boat Ashore. He may have had to sung it in school when he was a kid. I never got a story. He couldn't communicate where his love for it came from. Anyway, Dr. Clemens sung Michael Row the Boat Ashore, which became a little private anthem to my dad. So long way of saying, maybe start there, season 1, episode 9, and you'll also hear bits and pieces of everyone Mark already invoked, as well as other amazings.
Thank you.
Speaking of your father, I thought you were going to recommend the episode with Vincent Pastore, who played Big Pussy on The Sopranos, which you acted in.
Well, that's why I couldn't recommend it. That'd be too self-referential.
It'd be too obvious, too self-referential, because I listened to it. It was basically you talking to your father is what it is. It's things you wanted to say to your father and things you think your father wanted to say to you, but you couldn't say to each other.
Definitely, there's some truth in that, even if the experiences that my character and Mr. Pastore's character are interpreting are maybe different than my dad and I. Absolutely, there's a lapse in communication that I, the writer, can kind of fill in conceptualizing these pieces. I love doing that. And Mark, if you listened to it in audio only form, here's the kind of person Vincent Pastore is. He said, no, I want to make a video out of this. I want to make this pop. I want to showcase you when you're writing in a light where people can kind of see it a bit more. And he was willing to do that. So that's the singular episode that also lives in audio visual form. And you can find this on aroundthesunpodcast.com.
I look forward to seeing that. Now that this would transition to the fun stuff because
Yeah.
you got quite a cast for all 3 seasons. Now,
Yeah.
how did you get Vincent Pastore? Now you seem to have a lot of Jersey connections too. So it sounds like I know Bruce Villanch apparently had a crush on your stepfather.
Oh boy, you saw that or heard that. Yes, they are both from Paterson, New Jersey, a city that's very close to my heart. In fact,
Right.
I geographically I grew up much closer to Paterson than Jersey
Right.
City where I live now. And I've
Right.
always had family in both.
And by the way, Nicole, for you and the people listening, if you don't know who Bruce Villanch is, he's been
should.
the number one comedy writer forever. He was on the Hollywood Squares when Whoopi Goldberg was on Hollywood Squares.
He
And
was
if I
writing
showed you
all
a
those
picture, you would
jokes.
know. If I showed
Nice.
you a picture of him, you would know him. But he wrote the Star Wars Holiday Special. He wrote the Paul Lynde. Like he's been working since the 70s. I met him at the Portland Comedy Festival. Great guy. I actually tried to get him on the podcast during the pandemic. I was unable to, but he didn't have a crush on my stepfather. So, but Vincent Pastore, how did you land Vincent Pastore?
So, like a number of people in season 1, Vin is a teacher, Vin is a mentor, and I had worked with Vin at HB Studio in New York City in that capacity. So we had worked together a number of times. There's that. And then number 2, I did what I was supposed to do in putting the project on the grid with SAG. So every actor who's in the project is contracted, they're professional actors. But he trusted me enough because we had worked together to say yes. It's the pandemic. So, I was pretty eager to do something artistic and creative. And the fact that Vincent Pastore and all of these other individuals were willing to play along as just icing on the cake. It was going to get done either way. I am extroverted enough to need to see people and work with people after a month or 2 inside. I'm introverted enough to be okay for that first month or 2 and have concern for the hundreds of thousands of losses in the world. But I can't stay inside forever. That's not in my DNA.
Well, I thought, with the Sopranos connection, you from Jersey, I thought maybe you were a made man. Go ahead, Nicole.
I was just saying, you mentioned that everybody's SAG. Where do you stand right now? Are you affected by the writer's strike or?
The project is, yeah. So I'm also a SAG member, and there can be non-SAG actors in the project. They just have to be contracted the same as a SAG actor. That said, every name that's come up, except for my dad, is a SAG actor. So the project season 3 here, like I said, there's a little, I'm almost done, and that kind of hinges on the topical events of the day, the strike. And as a union member, I'm just going to go slow till they're ready to move forward again.
Mark.
Did you Taft-Hartley your dad?
No, I did not.
That's insider stuff. If you get it, you get it. But I mean, the first episode, you're talking about star power. You got Marsha Mason, who is just the Goodbye Girl. She was one of the hugest stars in the 70s. And Austin Pendleton, who's been in every movie, TV show. Nicole, you probably recognize him as the stuttering guy from My Cousin Vinny and other things.
Okay, yeah. I know who that is.
And they're both amazing talents as well as teacher, mentors, coaches, very approachable, very accessible. And I had the privilege of working with them outside of this project as well. Marsha actually directed me in benefit performance at the Bucks County Playhouse in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And, I'm not good at name dropping. I'm not good at being
I'll name drop for you because you got a lot of good names.
Well, Brooke Shields headlined that benefit performance at the Bucks County Playhouse along with other really just great, fabulous talent. Some with resumes we know, and other people who have been around and working forever. And for whatever reason, we might not know their names, but I think Marsha and Brooke would say they're equally talented.
I had Lisa from the It's Shakespeare You Dick podcast on once, and she did a movie with Russell Crowe. And Russell Crowe, I don't know, he did something, and she's like, look, there's no difference between you and me. I'm classically trained. You just got lucky. And there's probably more to it, but still.
Something popped. There's art and then commerce.
But her point was, it doesn't matter who you are. There's no reason not to be courteous.
A person is no less an actor or a writer if their projects don't pop. I mean, we can only live in the universe. We can't control it. So we can do the work. We can, hope we have some modicum of talent and original perspective to contribute. And that's I would like to think true. Right. And at the same time, we can't control what is commercially successful. And I think Marsha would tell you, the Goodbye Girl. I don't speak for anyone, as I may have said before, but I did read her autobiography called Journey. And I believe she talks about being across the street from a showing of the Goodbye Girl and seeing the lineup of people waiting to get into the theater to see it was just mind-blowing to her. And even though she had been working for decades up until that point, like nothing she had ever experienced.
Right.
Now, how come you went with Goodbye Girl and not Aubrey Rose, considering this is the Dark Mark podcast?
I don't think I've seen Aubrey Rose.
It's a horror film. I believe Anthony Hopkins is also in it.
Oh, Aubrey Rose. I got to check that out. I have not seen it.
I think they're remaking it, but don't quote me on that.
Well, if it doesn't have Marsha Mason in it, I don't want to see it.
And she's an amazing soul. She's a generous human, just like Austin, just like Vin, just like everyone you've referenced.
And go ahead, Nicole.
Well, Mark, you mentioned the actor who was on SVU and Jurassic Park, and I don't know his name. What was his name?
B.D. Wong.
B.D. Wong. I was going to say B.D. Wong, who has...
I was curious, what's his story? Can you give me kind of like a summary about what he, how working with him was and what he brought to the table?
So working with him was awesome. I did not know Mr. Wong prior to Around the Sun, asking him to join the cast. Again, the season 1 episodes and the season 1 cast, there's not much going on in the world. So
right.
He still has to say yes to the project. He still has to like the writing. But unlike the individuals that Mark referenced, he didn't know me from a hole in the wall. So I take special pride, especially in that first season, when people like Mr. Wong said yes without really knowing me or my intentions. I assume on some level he's banking on the names who have already trusted me in the project. He was great.
That's the thing. It does snowball. He was great.
Yeah, he was great. He stars in an episode called Apothecary, and he plays an Eastern medicinal practitioner opposite Christine Nagy. Christine, if you're from the Jersey City area, which is the Metro NYC area, she is a radio broadcaster on Light FM. So her voice I've listened to morning after morning after morning for many years, and she is a personal friend. So
that's great. Now, and Nicole, you don't. The thing is with B.D. Wong, you've seen him in like so many movies.
So many.
He's on Law and Order, all that stuff.
Yeah,
but you don't understand that this guy was like, he's a New York theater legend. Because I think he won a Tony for Madame Butterfly or M. Butterfly.
Did. That's wonderful.
And then, but he sort of was born in the wrong era. If he got started today and he was in his 20s or 30s today, he'd be a superstar because Asian representation is so much more today.
Yes.
As well as gay representation.
Ever see Father of the Bride with Steve Martin and Diane Keaton? And so he first came to my attention in a featured role opposite Martin Short. If you remember Martin Short's character in Father of the Bride, he's the wedding planner, and then he has an assistant. And they're both pretty, amazing, stereotypically flaming and amazing in their characters in the film. Right. That's how B.D. Wong is introduced to my younger self back in the 90s.
I think he's just he has such an emotional way of approaching art. Like, I think the way he acts is just really filled with like a depth that I really appreciate.
Yeah, it's really cool to see people's processes and how they like to approach the work. He had a lot of questions for me. It was also a particularly deep piece.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm the writer, so hopefully I don't
they're
sound
all
like a
pretty deep.
narcissist.
They're all pretty deep.
Thank you.
Even though there's
Thank you.
some are funny and some are not, and some are. I mean, they all have a depth, and they all speak to the human condition in 10 minutes or around that.
And the one that BD and Christine did, this apothecary episode, it's a bit abstract too. Christine's character is hypnotized and she revisits a prior trauma. So there was a lot to kind of talk through before we actually put the pedal to the metal and started the work of acting it, before they started the work of acting it with me directing it. It's an abstract piece and a deep piece, and in less capable hands, it could have gone a different way. But
they're in your hands. They're in your hands.
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that, Mark. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
They're in Brad's hands. Yes.
BD and Christine are amazing, and thank you.
Yeah, I would imagine BD Wong and Vincent Pastore have different approaches.
Yeah, and they're both. I mean, it's the truth is the connective tissue. So what's the truth of the character? And I think they're both very grounded in that. And what was really cool to me is when people have a process that is so foreign to me that I just have to kind of like follow their lead, even though I'm the director. They've directed themselves, and I'm thinking about Sally Struthers in her episode. She added so many great beats to it where I didn't really think there were beats. And I'm saying this as the writer, but you just trust and go with it. And she would say again, and then we would go back to revisit a earlier beat. Very cool.
She bossed you around.
I wouldn't say that. She educated me.
Did she call you meathead at any time?
She educated me without schooling me. She was awesome and a wonderfully jovial spirit.
But she's great.
Didn't call me meathead, but want to hear a fun thing? Self-referential.
Yeah, why not?
Sorry.
Why not? I would love to hear a fun thing.
I once wrote to Carol O'Connor for an autograph. Again, my younger self. Carol O'Connor famously
from All in the
played
Family,
Archie Bunker on All in the Family, and I asked him to call me a meathead, and I just thought my grandfather, who was that printer, would just love that. And Mr. O'Connor did, and my grandfather just couldn't stop laughing. So then I became meathead for a period of time to my grandfather. And I think now, in my older self, about the show that I haven't watched the finale of and somehow have stayed away from spoiler alerts, but the show with Brian Cox that everybody is so excited about, Succession. I understand that people approach Kieran Culkin's character and ask him to swear at them. He's like, no, I'm not that character. That's an actor. That's a part I'm playing.
Right.
So I'm appreciative for Mr. O'Connor for just going with it and giving my grandpa a good line to run with for a while.
Did you relay that story to Sally?
I didn't relay that story to Sally, but Sally had worked with Vin. They had done Bullets Over Broadway together at the Ogunquit Playhouse. And we also had another mutual friend who's not part of the podcast, but she had done Gilmore Girls with him. So much of our non-production time was spent talking about points of common question mark for those who are listening instead of watching.
The 6 degrees of Brad Forenza.
Yeah. Who the hell is Brad Forenza?
Now we people are getting to know you. Go ahead,
they
Nicole.
are.
Did you have an actor that you had a particular kinship with? Like they really got what you were putting down, like someone that you really felt connected to the work in a higher level?
Dr. Francois Clemens, who I referenced earlier, he slipped that spiritual in. Michael rowed the boat ashore for my dad because I asked him. I mean, he was tired. He gave a lot of himself in that performance. That's a mostly one person performance.
Right.
And it also happened that we recorded 2 or 3 days after my dad had died. And
Oh,
when
man.
people are contracted and it's on grid with the union and it takes months to get them, even the ones I know, y-
You
you
can't not
kind of
do
get
it.
one bite at the apple. So you can't
Mhm.
not do it. And I probably would have canceled it if my dad were still sick. But
Mm.
since my dad had passed, it felt okay. Here I go, putting my big boy pants on. And
Mhm.
maybe because of the moment, maybe because of him giving of himself through song, maybe because of a million different variables, I feel like we connected at a higher level that day. And he's also an ordained person. So he
Mhm.
has a hint of spirituality that comes with the territory.
Right.
And I'm ordained too, but I don't, carry
So
it in the same way as he does.
so am I, Universal Life Church. So I think we're
We're
brethren.
brothers, Mark.
Yes. So Nicole, if you want to get married, you have your choice from me or Brad. Well, let me
Can
ask you
I?
some. Go ahead.
Oh, well, just another response to Nicole's question. Mindy Cohn, who is in
Mhm.
season 2,
Mhm.
she recorded an episode. It's the 5th episode of season 2, I think. It's called
Mhm.
Mirage. And it's an episode that might sound like it's about nothing, but I wrote it with subtext. And
Mhm.
without telling her what that subtext was, she played it with that subtext. And of course, when you do these things, you do it again and again and again and again and again. And only in our final take did I tell her what I was thinking, and she told me what she was thinking, and it was total symmetry. And she had us crying that day on the production side of things. And she got an award for that episode from the
Wow.
Independent Series Awards folks.
That's amazing. And Mindy Cohn, if people don't know, was on The Facts of Life, most mainly known for that in the '80s, but
It's
has gone
also
on to
Velma
such a
Dinkley.
yes, a very distinguished career since then. But that's what a lot of people know her as. But I mean, apparently done a lot of theater work and just an amazing actress. But before I get to season 2, and we're going to get to season 3, season 1 was done during the pandemic.
Correct.
And now was everybody on Zoom? Were they taping separately? Were they taping together? How did you do that?
To answer the first part, we did record on remote technologies because that's what that era called for, and that's what
Hmm.
SAG told me I was allowed to do. People couldn't be in the same room. The
Okay,
world
so
wasn't
it
ready
wasn't on
for
Zoom,
that.
which is good because Zoom sucks. I hate Zoom, but go ahead. Even though we're
I
on Zoom
assume
now,
they're not a sponsor of your
they're
show.
not a sponsor, but they're
Stick to the energy drinks, everyone.
right. Well, there's another one coming. Wait till you hear this one, next one.
So we were on remote technology recording, and they did in season 1, which is how the question was posed. They all recorded together. So when you hear 2 people recording an episode in season 1, they're recording in the same remote session,
Hmm.
which is cool because a lot of acting is reacting, the
Right.
coaches and mentors like to say, and I agree.
Well, I was curious if they were done separately, but I know it's reacting, and the weird thing about doing it on a platform such as Zoom or something else is that there is a bit of a delay, so sometimes you don't get quite the organic reaction that you would in person.
Agreed.
Because
Agreed.
Nicole wants to do every show in studio, and
I love studio.
we will get back to it eventually.
I agree that there can be delays and, gaps in beats on
Hmm.
these remote technologies. And thankfully for me, it's not a podcast that's being broadcast live. So in post, if something is really egregious, I mean, I'm splicing all these different takes together anyway. So
Hmm.
likely in one of those very many takes, there's a take wherein there's no gap. And if not, I can still manipulate it in other ways in post, fix it in post.
So typically, how many takes do you do?
Well, I think
Or it
things come
depends on
in
the actor.
threes. I
Okay.
think all of that is true. It does depend on the actor, and it does depend on what I'm already asking them to do. And it also depends on, did we get what we need? So typically, I think good things come in threes, and I'll be happy with 3 fluid takes from start to finish. And then we go back and revisit certain beats. So my thinking is the 3 fluid takes will give me what I need to have kind of fluidity somewhere in one of those takes for the reasons you referenced a moment ago. And then we'll go back and revisit isolated beats. Like if you listen to that episode, Apothecary with B.D. Wong and Christine Nagy, there's a definitive event. We revisited that event a number of times after the 3 fluid records. Because Vin and I recorded ours. It's called The Museum. It's season 1, episode 8. Because he was so generous in wanting to do it on video as well as audio, that was several days of takes.
Right.
And yeah, depends. But for the most part, I start with the rule of threes. And then since at this point, I don't really know the cast personally in a way I knew much of the season 1 cast personally, I just want to be mindful of what I'm asking for them.
And I'll bet Vincent Pastore, aka Big Pussy, smells great, doesn't he?
Yes.
Because there's
and
nothing
he loves
sexier.
The work.
Yeah. Big Pussy must smell great because there's nothing sexier than a great smelling man. Wouldn't you agree, Brad?
Absolutely. And at the same time, he is the most lovely, generous, awesome man. And he has a jarred sauce, red sauce. So of course he smells great. It's like,
Right. Well, I was going to get,
sauce.
Please get Big Pussy sauce. And I definitely want to check that out. But, I'm sure B.D. Wong smelled great too. And there's nothing sexier than a great smelling man. And guys, if you want to be sexy, get Tactical Soap. Tactical Soap is one of our sponsors. And they have three types of soaps: Durden, Maverick, and Bonds. And they have 3 different types of each. And they are pheromone infused soap. Pheromone infused soap. So you're going to smell great, and you're going to attract the ladies. You're going to attract the men. You're going to have your choice of whatever you want. Everybody's going to be flocking to you because you smell great, just like B.D. Wong does, just like Vincent Pastore does, just like Brad does, I'm sure. Go to the podcast description, get Tactical Soap, pheromone infused soap. Nicole, you had a question.
I did have a question. I was going to
And you can laugh, Brad. Go right ahead. I know you're smiling.
Oh, I'm smiling wide. And somewhere in there's a joke about smelling people through remote technology, but I haven't. My synapses aren't working.
You smell wonderful. Go ahead, Nicole.
I was going to ask, was there an episode that was more challenging than any of the others?
So those abstract episodes do tend to be harder to communicate. And the tricky part in directing them is not over intellectualizing them. There's an episode coming up in season 3 starring Katie McLean and Robert Funaro. Katie McLean is a 3-time Emmy winner for her multiple roles on daytime television. Robert Funaro plays Eugene throughout the Sopranos series. Yeah.
This is the 3rd Soprano you got on the show.
Correct. And we have to say who the second is because she's just an
Maureen,
amazingly generous human.
Maureen Van Zant, who is the wife of Stephen Van Zandt, who played Silvio and also was the guitar player for Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. Hi, Maureen.
And I can tell you, in having been directed by Maureen, she does smell great.
Oh, great. Maybe she needs some Tactical Soap. Maybe she doesn't need Tactical Soap. She smells great. Maybe Stephen could get some Tactical Soap and yeah.
So
he won't be frowning all the time like he does in The Sopranos,
And I hear that in part got him the part. I mean, lots of talent, of course, but
yes,
it's also a look. You seem to David Chase like you could play this type. So let's cut your teeth here in this acting world.
Now, how did you meet Maureen Van Zant?
I'll tell you how I met Maureen Van Zant. It's the same as Vincent Pastore, through acting, through being a student at HB Studio and a longtime student of theirs in New York City. And then the relationships just kind of transcend that space at a certain point. So not only has Maureen directed me, I also acted alongside her in a production Vin directed of, I'm blanking on the name of it, but everybody knows it. It's Arthur Miller. It's not Death of a Salesman. It's with Beatrice, and it's Christmas time, and the cousins come from Italy. It's in Brooklyn in Red Hook.
It's
Help
not
me
the
out.
Crucible. It's
No.
let me hit Wikipedia, but go ahead. Yeah, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. 'Cause I don't want.
All right. While you're looking that up, I'm going to finish my story and finish answering Nicole's question about episodes being hard to direct. They're hard to direct when they're abstract, and we have one coming up with Katie McLean and Robert Funaro, which steers heavily into the abstract.
All
And
My Sons, A View from the
they
Bridge.
both went with it, and it was awesome. And it's coming up in season 3. And Mark just said it, in Red Hook, Brooklyn, which has a bridge.
A View from the Bridge.
Boom.
The theater's in such a weird place now, Broadway, off Broadway, in that I'm trying to think back in Arthur Miller's day, or even all those, back then, Steinbeck, Arthur Miller, even Neil Simon, probably David Mamet was like the last person that really, their stuff just got in the zeitgeist and was nationwide, and people really paid attention to it. Musicals are like that. Hamilton did that. But what was the last play with no music that really just became a cultural phenomenon? I can't even think.
I can't either.
Like Gary Glenn Ross, maybe? I don't know. And that was like the 80s.
I'm thinking of Angels in America.
I forgot. Angels in America. Yeah, I'm
but
sorry
that's
about that.
like 89, 90, 91, 92, 93,
Right.
I would bet.
Right.
Yeah, and it's also so expensive to produce theater.
So everything's
even
now
if you're a commercial
Disney.
I went
success.
to a good play around Christmas time, maybe January. It was when it was cold out. It was called 222. It came from England. It was really good. It didn't have any singing.
Wasn't that a show with Marla Gibbs?
I don't know. I don't.
You're
remember
thinking
who was in it.
227, the sitcom.
Thank you. Okay.
Which my friend Barry Sobel was in.
222. It was an interesting horror theatrical production, and it has one of the actors from American Horror Story in it, but I don't recall his name.
Because
But that was the last film I saw, or the last play I saw that didn't have singing, that did really well. It did really well. People were talking about it for a long time.
I just read a interview. I say just, it probably was a year ago, but it was by the Irish playwright Martin McDonagh, who I just love his stuff. Lots of subtext in his stuff.
Right.
And he's segued more heavily into film, not only writing them, but directing and producing them on some level.
I love Banshees of Inisherin.
Banshees of Inisherin is just awesome.
Yeah.
It was a really, I thought, great year for film. But the interview with Mr. McDonagh was about the ways in which theater, in paraphrasing him here, it takes so much time and it is so expensive. So that sometimes, in an effort to get the art out there, even though I imagine film at his level is no less expensive, it just takes less time.
No, because we're in LA and we're by the Pantages Theater.
Right.
So that's as close to Broadway as we get. And you look on there, everything's like Beetlejuice, the Tina Turner musical, like it's all stuff based on other things.
And stuff
Disney.
Where they know they can fill 1,000-seat house.
That's the thing.
They got to pay the bills.
Right. So
no, 222 was at the theater downtown. I'm not sure what the name of that theater is.
Right.
But it was a really beautiful theater, really great production. Like, I'd recommend it. And I would like to see more plays, to be honest. The theater is also kind of expensive, unfortunately.
And I think sometimes the intimacy, I don't know how many people were in 222, but when I think of straight plays like A View from the Bridge by Mr. Miller, or Proof for Angels in America, the casts are smaller and kind of call for a more intimate space. I think sometimes if producers are only going to make their money back if they're playing in a large 1,000-seat house for a limited run, one weekend only, or what have you, the intimacy gets lost. So it's all a trade-off.
I agree with you. 222 had a 4-person cast, and it was a huge audience. Like, it was big. Like, we were in like the third section, and so like it was like it was very small, but it was also really good. They projected really well. They acted well. Like, you could tell the emotion. But if it's a more intimate space, it would have been a more intense experience for sure.
when I hear about shows like 222, and now I'm going to look for it, and a man of my word, I will look for it, and I will look for it in community theater where there are amazing actors and lower ticket prices, and also the intimacy that I think, without having seen it, I think a four-hander would call for.
I won't get too off topic, but it was basically these four people are gathered together and they're sharing stories and experiences from their lives while something more sinister is happening in the background.
Ooh, okay. Thank you for the tip, Nicole.
Yeah,
no problem.
Sounds like you might enjoy Around the Sun. It's not quite as sinister, but it's
I think I will.
And all the intimacy is there at the right price point, $0.
Trust me, that's my price point. I love that. We got to get into the Villanch of it because Bruce Villanch, as we were talking before, he's been the comedy writer for like everything, since from the 70s to, just everything. He's written everything. He's still, still writes everything. Great guy. And like I say, you had a family connection with him. And Around the Sun, let's put a cap on season 1. Now, when you put it out, it became a big hit.
Yes, thanks. It's not lost on me thanks to these
Broadway
people and their good names.
Yeah, it was picked up on the Broadway network or Broadway podcast network.
Correct.
So you made it to Broadway.
Correct. And also they cross-cut. So the names we've mentioned straddle multiple decades and also genres. We've got reality TV, the most listened to radio station in the country, as I understand it, through Ms. Nagy, and classic films like The Goodbye Girl, like My Cousin Vinny, classic television shows like The Sopranos, like All in the Family, ...
Right.
And that's all takes place in New York City. And then season 2 takes place in the desert. And unlike season 1, I, as a writer, got schooled in having to write for deadlines and write for a medium because of the popularity that the project had gained in the release of it.
Now, why did you switch from New York to the desert?
So the episodes are self-contained, and I thought to keep it interesting, let me move locations. It's also the desert, I think, can be a good, metaphor for things existential and things contemplative. And it's just so very different than the densely populated metropolitan community that I love to call home. So that's why we're in the desert. And there's also some fun things you can do with aliens and nuclear meltdowns. We did them.
You had Piper Laurie, the mother from the original Carrie, and all sorts of other
three-time Oscar
great things.
nominee.
Three-time Oscar nominee. Plays an alien.
Soul.
Plays an alien.
Correct. Opposite me. And
you're an alien too. But
I'm a nice alien, and she's
we knew that all already.
Grumpy, but only grumpy in character. Wait, you knew I was a nice person or an alien already, or both?
No comment. But okay. So she was.
Big pussy's coming for you.
Yeah, I don't want big pussy coming for me. But she was super nice too. Now, how did you get Piper Laurie?
I didn't know Ms. Laurie, and Ms. Laurie was 90 when we recorded. And the strangest thing to this day is the fact that she acted opposite me. We talked about in season 1, and we have a prior relationship, so I knew he would trust me to act opposite me. It surprised me that she acted opposite me, not because I doubt my abilities, but she's a 3-time Oscar nominee. She worked with Paul Newman in The Hustler,
right?
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Twin Peaks, on and on and on.
Right.
And I guess, without self-aggrandizing, something in what she had already heard from season 1 and something that she read and what I sent to her team spoke to her, and she trusted me. And I guess that is the advantage of having a body of work to show for myself that all does start with Cousin Dolores and Vin.
And how intimidated were you acting opposite her?
Intimidated. I had super palpitations that day. I didn't want to let her down. I wanted to do well by her. I wanted to present her awesome talents in the best light, and somehow thought that I could go toe to toe with her and as an actor. And so long as she said yes and in the spirit of improv, I also said yes and. I mean, you ask these people through their teams and they say yes or they say no. It's their choice. Right. The tricky part, and that's the only time I've ever done it, usually, I mean, Vin and I have a continuous working relationship, but Piper Laurie, I met her that day. I spoke with her team before and after, but directing myself in something that I was also acting in was a particularly tricky experience. So I had other people on the production side of things with me that day, just to make sure there were objective eyes on what was happening. And it worked well. And she was just everything you'd expect. She was an amazing spirit, and of course the talent, comes with her resume.
I mean, it's just I can only imagine directing while you're acting is a challenge enough. But was there ever a time that you were like, okay, cut, Piper, you're not doing it right. Do it like this.
Never, ever. And that's why I had additional people on the recording session with me that day, just to keep an objective set of eyes. And if they noticed something, I mean, we break when we do these things in between takes, they would share it with me, and then I would weigh whether or not, it was something that was pivotal. Because something with all actors, it's not a marionette show, especially when you're talking about a 3-time Oscar nominee, but really anyone, me included, presumably you included, Mark. We're bringing a professional skill set, and we have an idea of how we'd like to present a character, whether it's someone who's crashing after hours at the museum or a nice alien. We're bringing our perspective to that role. Nobody wants to sit through line reads, especially after they've had their career, and at 90, Around the Sun's not really gonna move the needle on her career. Her career speaks for itself. She's doing us a favor and being part of our ensemble. But I'm not a sycophant either. So you kind of cut your losses as to what's worth saying and what's worth, no, she knows what she's doing.
Right.
But it must be fun at 90 to get a piece of good material and get to do it.
Well, and that's the feather in my cap, because while she doesn't say that directly, I would like to think it's implied. I would like to think that's what gets her to yes.
Right. And so, and all these things that you said were in the desert, and I saw a video of you frolicking in the desert. And if you're ever
frolicking,
you were frolicking a bit. But if
I say that with this high-pitched voice.
Frolicking, yes.
Frolicking. I frolic. I'll go with it. Yes, and
you're frolicking a bit. But I was going to say, if you're ever frolicking in the desert, you should take along some Renegade CBD, which is another one of our sponsors. It's Renegade CBD. Nicole will tell you they have white chocolate, they have gummies, they have all sorts of things. Bath bombs,
luxurious bath bombs.
Like when you were a kid, bath bombs.
Yeah,
they go into the tub, they melt down, and they have CBD in the water with the beautiful colors.
So instead of a sponge, it becomes.
Well, you use a sponge.
A little ball, and then you put it in the.
Love it.
And then
you've never done a bath bomb with it's like a bubble bath. It's
amazing.
With CBD,
it turns the water a very pretty color.
Beautiful.
Right. So go to renegadecbd.com for all your CBD needs. Now, radio plays such as you put on were very popular in the 40s and 50s. Were you a fan of those?
Well,
I mean, it's before your time.
The audience should know I was not alive in the 40s and 50s.
I know you weren't alive, but I know that I've listened to some like on Sirius Radio, and now they got everything on YouTube. I mean, because I know that this was something that you put on podcast format just out of necessity. But were you conscious of the form? Are your fans people that that older people that remember the radio plays and they really like it? And
I think growing up with such heavy influence from grandparents, I was more than a little bit informed about the lost medium of radio play and radio drama. I remember my other grandfather, my mom's dad, he was into The Shadow. And in his twilight, I remember he had The Shadow on cassette tape. I got it for him. But he was always talking up The Shadow. And I found these cassette tapes at a retail store. And yeah, I remember he would always have it on. He was alternating between talk radio and The Shadow. And I only wish that there was more than The Shadow for me to purchase for him.
Right. Well, now, I mean, now that with podcasts, there are a lot of old radio plays on podcasts now, and Sirius and on YouTube. So it's what's old is new again, and you're bringing it back with a fresh perspective.
Always,
So,
and
yeah.
Hopefully some fresh storytelling too.
I think so, and but yeah, as I said, Bruce Villanch had a crush on your stepfather. So, how did you reach out to him? And apparently, he was overjoyed because you had a pretty heavy dramatic part for him, which he's not used to. He's used to being the funny guy.
Yeah, and in season 2, which Bruce Villanch is in, he is in a couple of different episodes. So he's in one decidedly comedic episode with Mindy Cohn. That's her second episode also. And that's episode 7 called Lonely Planet. The episode that you're referencing is called Area 51, and he plays a military officer who's kind of in a bit of a tiff, squabble, etc., with a young cadet who is coming in wide-eyed and bushy-tailed about what the young cadet, believes his oath to the country is. And that differs from what Mr. Villanch's character thinks that oath is. So yeah, he's amazing in both of those parts. Of course, we know he's a comedy genius. He's written more award shows and has more Emmy awards than I can count for doing so. And the dramatic offer, I think, spoke to him on some level. And of course, it doesn't hurt that he and my stepfather were classmates. And I say I don't speak for these people, but I know that Mr. Villanch is on record saying he had a crush on his Italian dreamboat, that being my stepfather. And to answer your question, they're friends, and they maintain a social media relationship, and there's a Florida connection there for their families, and they see each other at reunions. I still went through his team just because I've learned that that's how it gets done, and that's how it stays organized.
Right.
And then parallel to that, my stepfather did send him a little note saying, keep your eyes open for this. But it comes through the team and through a contract. It's a professional project, and he's certainly a professional and another beautiful person.
He's a great guy. He was a great guy. Well, I'm part Italian. He was very flirty with me, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But go ahead.
He's so fast. His brain is so sharp, which is obvious, but talking with him, promoting the project, which he helped with last year, I can't keep pace with him. He's one joke after another.
He's a whirlwind of comedic energy. Now, here's the question I have, because I've seen you on our friend Amber LeMay's show and other shows with him, and you always refer to him as Mr. Villanch, not Bruce. And this is ironic because he's the guy that had the documentary They Call Me Bruce.
Yeah, Get Bruce.
I
remember that.
So he seems like a guy anybody could come up to him. Hey, Bruce. So he seems like more of a Bruce guy than a Mr. Villanch.
And in person, I've referred to him as Bruce. I went down to see his show that he wrote with Dolly Parton's music. It was an awesome show. I saw it in Delaware. So
because Big Pussy is
Vinny, Bruce.
Big Pussy is Vinny, but Bruce Villanch is Mr. Villanch.
There have been a couple Mr. Pastores in here too, but I didn't think we would talk about him at this length. I'm going to have to share this with him. But
please.
I try to be professional with the formalities, but they're both, call me Bruce,
Right.
call me Vin kind of
Please.
people.
And please
Approachable.
tell both of them if they ever want to go on the Dark Mark show, please. I would love to have them. I'd love to have any pussy on this show,
This is
so
just
I'll
a
be
little
happy to.
like, I mean, I'm not trying to name drop here because Mark will be like, you're name dropping, but like I met him outside.
Okay, here we get ready for a name drop.
I'm ready.
Well, so I met him outside of an AA meeting. I wasn't attending. I worked in the restaurant where it was held.
So
and Gerard Butler comes down, and then he had like I'm his waitress. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm Nicole. He goes, I'm Jerry.
I love it.
Yeah. So Gerard Butler is by Jerry. I just think it's really cool.
Good for you to break his anonymity.
I feel like
think he was very anonymous at the meeting.
That's a good point. Is it really Alcoholics Anonymous if everyone knows?
Well, anyway. I think he was speaking to help people. I think that's why he was there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Beautiful.
Well, Brad, we got to do it part 2. But you were going to say something?
Oh, just now I might be bringing you into season 3, but I just wrapped with Estelle Parsons, and how could she's 95?
Wow.
I'm gonna call her Estelle. What's up, Estelle?
Hi, Estelle.
Miss Parsons
I guess I'd
worked very well, and she was fine with Estelle as well. But I waited for the invite, and same with Ms. Laurie.
Right. Well, that I understand them. I mean, they're grand dames and they've been around forever. But Bruce Villanch he just seemed like seems like just a regular person. But Estelle Parsons just a legend, and I didn't know she was 95. That's amazing.
And also a regular person at the end of the day who responded to the work, and
and just a
hey,
legend.
Dude. Yeah, feels a bit different than Miss Parsons.
From Bonnie and Clyde to Around the Sun.
Yes,
I mean, she's a theater legend. She's a film legend. She's been around forever.
Rachel, 5 amazing. Tony noms. Beautiful amazing. Person.
Well, that's wonderful. You'll have to get a centenarian now because you went from 90 to 95. We'll have to figure out. Is Olivia de Havilland still alive? I don't know who's 100 around here. Oh, Norman Lear. You can get Norman Lear.
Norman Lear is a huge inspiration to me. Right. I know to many people, I'm sure to you too, but growing up with his stuff, cramming a lot of content, cramming an Arthur Miller drama into 22 minutes. I mean, Around the Sun episodes average 10 to 15, but I think that Norman Lear Syndicate, growing up with that, has stayed in my muscle memory, especially as I revisit some of his stuff now that he's, everything old, air quotes, is new again.
Right. Well, I think maybe Mel Brooks first, and then you get you got to work your way up to it. But I was going to say, we can go with, there's so many extraordinary names that have responded to your material and acted your material. One person, because it's funny because you have like a sneak preview of season 2, and it's funny because you're like Richard Kind and Richard Kline are both in it, and their names are so similar. And Richard Kind, obviously from Mad About You, Curb Your Enthusiasm, everybody knows them.
And The Watcher, sticking with the horror theme.
Yes, The Watcher. He's been in everything. But Richard Kline, who was in Three's Company, and we just had a Three's Company conversation because Nicole has a friend who's trying to date younger women.
Yes.
And tell him this story.
All right. So my friend, we were all together at the bar, and he'd already told me he was interested in her. And I'm like, oh, okay, because he's interested in any pretty woman in his 20s. My friend
he's in his 50s. He's in his 50s.
My beautiful young friend is she's 23. He's like 50. I don't want to put him on blast. He's in his 50s. And so he mentions Three's Company, and she has no idea what that is. So he then goes into a very long speech trying to explain to her everything about Three's Company. It took like 20 minutes. At the end, she didn't know any better, but she was nice and polite to him.
And how would she know?
Exactly. She wouldn't know because she wasn't alive.
It's such a great show, and it holds up, and it's farcical and all that stuff. I understand it's based off of a British show, like so many of our shows are.
He did mention that when he was giving the speech, actually.
Yeah, and it holds up. I miss seeing these shows because they're so formative for me. But yeah, Richard Kline, who played the neighbor Larry, he is in season 2, and he's in an abstract dramatic episode with Caroline Aaron called After the Apocalypse.
So this is a long way from the lecherous neighbor on Three's Company. So basically, Richard Kline would come in every episode of Three's Company and hit on some woman badly. And this is not what he does.
Script an episode in season 2 of Around the Sun that he was very gracious to do. And that's not the one opposite Caroline Aaron, though he was gracious to do both of them. He did one, I'm tempted to say it's effectively the Larry character. And I don't want to say that because I wrote it, and it's not based off of anything, at least of all Three's Company. It's quite dramatic, but that Larry character is in the muscle memory. So in thinking who might be willing to do this, who would be really great and awesome at hitting on a younger woman played by a beautiful soul, Jenny Kwan, who was on California Dreams in the 90s and does a lot of voice work and has become a friend as well. I thought of Mr. Kline, and he said yes. And again, I'm grateful to that, especially when one considers in his long and esteemed career, I'm sure every other script has a variation of Larry in it. And hopefully he appreciated the part that was not Larry enough to, validate, all right, I'll be this creepy guy again. And he was
I got to listen to that. It's called Off the Reservation. It's season 2, episode 4.
So, to explain real fast why we were even talking about that, there's actually this really excellent restaurant called Mr. Furley's, and he wanted to take her there.
Beautiful. Don Knotts.
I know, right?
So when you're in LA, Brad, we'll take you to Mr. Furley's.
I didn't know there was a restaurant called Mr. Furley's. Maybe it was meant to be that I didn't know.
All the specials are like real nostalgia makers. Like they're all kind of taken from the show. Yeah.
It was meant to be that I didn't go so that I can go with you fine folks. Yes. I was in LA last spring for an award show wherein Around the Sun got some recognition.
Right.
And had I known about it, I totally would have gone. I mean, we did all the hallmarks of the greater Los Angeles area, but
not Mr. Furley's
would speak to me. So meant to be, I didn't know about it.
I'm more of a Roper's guy because to me, there's nothing funnier than the fact that Mr. Roper would say a line and there was a camera in a spot where he would just turn and just start mugging. But that's just
I loved her, Audra Lindley.
Yeah. Oh, she's great.
With her muumuus. I loved her. Oh, what a great character.
She was great. But so it's great. You're winning podcast awards, which, by the way, this show has never won and never will. What are the podcast awards like?
Well, this was not exclusive to podcasts. This included independent continuous content. So it could be a web series, but there are separate categories for web series as there are for scripted audio dramas. And that's cool. I mean, it's professional networking out of the gate. There's events outside of the awards ceremony or the showcasing of projects, but then there's a hint of validation in being nominated. It's a privilege to be nominated. And last year, Around the Sun was nominated in a number of categories, but didn't win. And it's okay. It still is a win because I met some cool new creatives who do similar writer, producer, actor things. And this year we won.
So nice. It's an honor to be nominated, but you are not the Susan Lucci of the podcast awards. You actually won the second time around.
That's awesome.
Correct. And we've won. It's not, I mean, I'm doing a lot of self-promotion.
Promote yourself, Brad.
I apologize for that, but someone said to me, actually here, I'll self-promote. Vianne Cox, who's in episode 3 of season 1 alongside Lily Cooper. They're both awesome Broadway stalwarts and Tony nominees. She said to me at that first awards ceremony, but it's not about the awards, right? The prize is in doing the work. And when she said it, I'm thinking like, yeah, that's, sure. But when I think more deeply about why we do what we do, why anyone does what they do, why you, Mark, do what you do, you're not submitting for awards, it would seem, based on what you said a couple moments ago. So it's not why you do what you do, and it's not why I do Around the Sun. It's just kind of one of the perks that may or may not come with the territory, but it's not why I'm close to wrapping a season 3.
I really want to get a podcast award. I really do. But I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Start a campaign.
No, this show I'm going to submit. I'm going to submit this show, and maybe we'll figure it, because I'm going to try to wean off your award winning. So when you lost, you didn't do like Samuel Jackson and go fuck, like none of that stuff.
I did not. I don't even remember the moment because there's no camera in my face. I mean,
Right.
It's not that. And
or like the Tommy Lee Jones grumpy face, like,
yeah, if anything, because I was in LA for just such a short time, I remember thinking like, well, let me just leave now for the airport with traffic.
Right.
But of course I didn't, and that's a hint of a joke.
Mm-hmm.
But Ms.
it.
Cox's words about why do we do what we do, I think are salient. Not right after the loss, but with perspective, it's salient. Why do we do what we do? I promise I don't do it for the awards.
Go ahead.
I'm an independent writer, and I write because I enjoy just connecting with an audience.
Yeah.
I put my emotions out there. It's like it's therapeutic for me.
And before anybody signs on to your projects, Nicole, I'm sure, writing for me is the cheapest therapy going. So there's got to be some gratification before anything gets recorded or presented in any medium.
I feel amazing when I complete something. When I get it all out, it's just like an amazing rush. It feels so good.
And no co-pays to boot.
By the way, this just in, the Pulitzer Prize was going to give you the prize for Slow Burn Your Poetry Book, but they said since you don't want it, they're not going to do it. I really deserve to win funniest plug, but I don't think they have a category.
Segues. Let's create a category for segues.
Best segues. But and speaking of segues, we're almost at an hour and a half. You got to tell me what's in store for season 3 and when that's coming out. Tell everybody about that.
Well,
who you have, because I've seen the cast and it's another impressive cast.
Lucky man is all I can say, and a hard working dude. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
Season 3, we have, I just don't want to forget anyone. So let me go alphabetically. For season 3, we have Francois Clemens making a second appearance.
Great.
Again with Michael Row the Boat Ashore. So hi, Dad.
Right. It's a beautiful
Robert
day in the
Funaro.
neighborhood.
Yep. Judy Gold,
a great comedian,
writer, Emmy winner. Tony winner Wilson Germain Heredia.
Wow.
Terry who is a rising Disney star and Disney's first non-binary lead. And who I going alphabetically, Katie McLean, who I referenced before, is a 3-time Emmy winner from many roles on many daytime TV shows. Ms. Estelle Parsons, and Jay Rodriguez, Emmy winner for Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, the original iteration.
You got to see all these people together. It's just, what a great assortment of people. What a diverse assortment.
So here's
people.
why you should get an award for segues. Recognizing you're probably thinking it was time to wrap up. You're giving me a license to say that you will see these people. Well, you'll hear them together, because season 3, in addition to taking place in a snowy mountain region, it's also a continuous plot line. So it's not 2 actors in one episode, a different set of 2 actors in another episode. You're getting the same character arc throughout the season, which will drop mid-fall 2023.
And what prompted that change?
Just challenge to myself, like Nicole was saying, just learning, growing about myself, sure, but also now per the Broadway Podcast Network and per the eyes that are on this project and the talent that's in it, I'm just trying to step up my game every season. We're all growing and evolving, right?
I would like to think so. Nicole is, she's actually smiling now. So that's a good one. But
I dig you guys.
I dig you. I told you, we have a vibe. When people come on the show, it seems random, and it is, but there's a madness to it. And
Dwayne Scott Cerny is a good, real person. So no surprise that he connected me to good, real people.
Well, so are you. And first off, I appreciate the praise. First off, I appreciated the praise that you actually listened to our show and you liked it. And
Yes.
that you came on the show and it was great. And as I said, we barely scratched the surface. Nicole, part 2 at some point.
Absolutely, yes.
So when does season 3 of Around the Sun come? I didn't mean to interrupt you again. I've interrupted you the whole time.
No, I thank you. That was me thanking you and Nicole for the invite. And now the plug for season 3, it'll drop via the Broadway Podcast Network and available wherever you listen to podcasts in mid-fall 2023. So typically, to make it snappy for you, it's usually late October.
That sounds like I know we'll be doing all of our Halloween episodes, but I think we'll have to squeeze you in and
Yeah, for sure.
sometime in mid-October. And
I'll have some merch for you, or what do they call it? Swag. I'll have some swag. We'll have our nice graphics approved. Who knows? Maybe the strike will be over, but if the strike ends, you might not be interested in having me back. You might want someone else back.
Oh.
But we would be privileged to come back if you would have us back.
No, Brad, we dig you. We definitely want to have you back. And yeah, I want to have Dwayne back too. I haven't had, I think he's got a new book coming out, so we got to have him back. But so you approve Brad for part 2, not just because he's giving you free swag, but because he's that interesting a person.
He's definitely interesting.
And
Thank
Brad,
you, Nicole. Thank you, Mark.
How do people get a hold of you, and how do people listen to Around the Sun and all your websites and all your social media and all that stuff?
So you can catch up on the 2 complete seasons of Around the Sun wherever you listen to podcasts.
Or like Nicole, you can listen to one and see if you like it and then listen to the rest.
They're also available at aroundthesunpodcast.com, and I'm available at authenticallybrad.com. And you can find me on social media, where I try to be interesting, but I'm really an introvert at heart, at Brad Forenza.
Not today. You're
Well,
very extroverted on this show.
You're letting me talk about something that I love and I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into in the best way possible. So thank you.
And next time you're on, we'll talk about your movies, your books, your music. We haven't even scratched the surface.
You did your homework.
Yeah, I always do. And Nicole, and it's not easy because your website doesn't give any information, so I really had to dig.
Well, that's the kind of extrovert I am, which is not a good extrovert.
Very enigmatic. You're a man of mystery, Brad. But speaking of mystery, you should check out Nicole's new book, Slow Burn. It's a poetry book. And tell everybody how they can get that, and tell Brad how he can connect to you on social media, Nicole.
I want to read these poems as well.
Okay. So I'm Nicole H6 on Facebook and at Nicole6books on Instagram. And there is a link in my bio I self-published the poetry book this time rather than going with the publisher. So there's an easy link. You just click on it and you can buy it if you want. I am also working on, for the next 13 months, I am working on my collection of horror stories, 13. And if you'd like to get on my reading list, which you can get a free horror story every month, contact me, slide into my DMs, and I'll make it happen.
I think Brad's in on that.
Yes.
And hopefully I'll be in, I haven't done a show in New York in a long time, or New Jersey, but hopefully I'll be back soon. And I am Goth Comedian on all social media. Everybody have a wonderfully creepy week. Bye.